Emily needs to come back. We'll go with that. So hi, good day. Hi, everybody. So this is going to be the next step in our wood process. We're going to put a wash on everything. There's 3 different color washes to go with each of the different woods. Now, something I wanted to point out, the importance of sampling. Because when you sample, and just to refresh, when I say sample, it means we're doing something off of project before we do it on the project. And when you're in a shop, usually that means you have like a piece of wood or material similar to what you're working on, so you can test different stuff out on it before you put it on the main thing. In this case, our sample is our thing. It's what we call life-size sampling. So the importance of it is, this was my first attempt at the light wash. I do not like it because you can see it's a little more opaque, kind of like washed everything out, as opposed to this one that has, you know, a wash over, but you can still see a little bit movement underneath. This also came out really beautiful. You see a little bit of movement, but it smooths it back, as opposed to this, which just washes it out. So we then shifted in opacity, and now I have a wash that I like better because it lets those colors come out through. Again, importance of sampling, importance of testing out if you can, trying it out somewhere else, so that way you can kind of change your formula. Now, washes. Basically, some people use wash and glaze interchangeably. I do not. A wash is something where you put water into the paint and you're generally trying to like actually kind of put another layer that's its own thing on top of something else, and it still lets stuff come up and through underneath. But a glaze is when you mix something like a sealer or a medium into your paint, and that's going to make it so that it is transparent and it's more tinting the color underneath. So it's going to let everything show up under, like all the textures and stuff. It's just going to tint the color and move it, and it usually has something that's not water. Again, that's interchangeable. If you work with a charge who calls this a glaze and what, go with it. It's fine. But just so you know, I personally think there's a difference between a glaze. Now, a wash can be used as a glaze if it's thin enough, but again, tends to be, if it's going to be a true glaze, put an actual substance into it, like a medium or a sealer. Yes?
Is this the H2O mixture?
Yes, this is the H2O mixture that I spoke of. So basically, the way I do these washes is just these colors and water. When mixing washes, big thing, and especially important with these, the paints we're using are house paints. Now, quick paint part lesson. Paint has 3 parts. There's a pigment, a binder, and a vehicle. So your vehicle is whatever is the base. In this case, we are using water-based. So therefore, water is your vehicle. Binder is kind of the glue substance that makes it that, like, you know, stickiness, whatever. So that's the binder. And pigment, kind of self-evident. Now, the reason house paint is cheap is because its pigments and its binders tend to be pretty cheap, and they tend not hold together well. So when using it for something like this, for thinning stuff down, they're not super, we're going to get a lot of what's called settling. So when we mix these washes, when you get them, you always want to give them a stir, because what you're going to find is as you stir on the binder, you're going to feel all that pigment and all that binder is kind of settled down because it's a cheap paint. So water splits it very easily because you're basically adding more vehicle to stuff that's already not great. Now, there is this paint you will usually be using in a more professional senior shop, and we do have some here, so in other projects we will play with it. It's called the Roscoe brand, and I'm sure some of you are familiar. There are a few different kinds. There's Off-Broadway, Supersats, and Ittings are the 3 kind of big boys. Off-Broadway, the most popular, tends to be used. Why do we love Roscoe? Because their pigments and binders are clutch. You can thin the crap out of Roscoe paints and they will still maintain a beautiful color and a really beautiful pull. Like, you'll notice as you use these, there'll be stuff floating, all that good stuff, but you know, we dream on a budget. So, and also house paints are perfectly adequate. Like, they absolutely work, and the advantage of them, you don't have to mix to the color you want. You can just go through a swatch book, find the exact color, boom, you've got it, and they last. For most shows and stuff, especially in early career and college and all that stuff, the things only have to last for a few performances. House paint works perfectly. You Roscoe paints, or like, as you start getting things that run more, or especially if you have like a really specific or specialized piece, that's when you're going to use it. But that's why they're great for making washes, they're great for making glazes, and they're beautiful. So that's something when, as we get on, we will find a way to play with some of the Roscoe paints, and you guys will see that. So, and you know, I'm going to splurge because that's just me. Splurge is also a technical term. You can use that, and if anyone comes after you, you can tell them I sent you. So make sure you give it a good stir. And I'm just going to pop that in the box there. Now, this is the part where we want to get a little more finicky with our lines. I apologize, I did try a taping method, but unfortunately the tape we have access to just causes a lot of bleed. So it's actually almost better that you just kind of eyeball, just keep your hand as steady as you can. You do not need, again, truly you don't need much wash. You don't want it to get too thick because then you'll see it kind of opaques out. Don't want to do that. Now you have trays and stuff around. I'll bring some more up. You can dab off in your tray, dab off on your paint clothes, whatever. But then what I was doing is just kind of, and again, let your eye track a little ahead of where you're going. And I usually started at the edges just to kind of get them established. If they're not perfect, that's fine. We'll fix it all later. But again, this is where you can start sort of reestablishing those slightly crispier edges and then just gently pulling it out. Again, you can already see this one especially really likes to get a little more on the opaque. You do not need much. It's a nice, solid, and to keep it nice and smooth, really let it smooth out a little bit, but you don't want it thick. And just get it nice, even overall coverage, but you can still see how the color's moving underneath. And that's how all of them are gonna be is, there's also another thing, because we are eyeballing this and it's drippy, we might have an oops. So I put out oops buckets. In these oops buckets are water and what's going to be our best friend, because right now we're only using it for oops, but these are your best texture friends. Sea sponges, natural sea sponges, show some respect. They were once alive and they are the most amazing tool ever. So sea sponge, you can use a store-bought sponge too for this purpose, but sea sponge are just a little more flexible.
SpongeBob.
Exactly so, except a little less square. So yeah, just, and again, say you waffle over your line, that's fine. Come in with the sea sponge, bring it down, have an oops bucket close to you with water. There's 2 of them out there. You wanna go get more buckets, there's sea sponges, just use those. Am I dripping? Yes. So yeah, that is also another way that you can do, that you can kind of clean up the little bit of things. So yes.
Are we mixing colors for the like we did with the?
For the scumbles, no.
For the scumbles.
This is just a single color application for each one. All
so
the light boards,
goes on the light. Medium.
all the light boards, gonna get the light wash. Also, keep an eye on your labels because now that we have full thick color and washes kicking around, just watch for the ones that say there's H2O in them. Once we get into more into color mixing, labeling is a big thing. Knowing what is in each. Now, technically, we should be labeling a little bit more for MSDS purposes, but that's a different lesson. So for now, this is enough to know what's in here. So just make sure you don't accidentally, if you're doing the scumble, grab a wash because it will not work the way you want it to work. So I'm gonna do just one more. I'm gonna do the medium so you guys can see the pull on that just really fast. And I think we're good on the